Welcome to Histories and Native Tales, where we delve into the raw, unvarnished chronicles of the American frontier, stories too authentic and gritty for Hollywood's polished narratives. Before we embark on today's compelling tale, remember to support our mission of bringing genuine historical accounts to life by clicking like, subscribing, and activating notifications. Your engagement helps us continue uncovering these remarkable stories. Now, let us transport ourselves back to May 1810. Dawn breaks over the pristine waters of the Jefferson River, in what modern maps would later designate as Montana Territory. Here, amid the morning mist rising from the crystalline waters, a band of fur trappers methodically prepares for another day of dangerous work. The camp buzzes with purposeful activity as these hardy men check their gear and ready their traps. These aren't just any frontiersmen. They represent the vanguard of white exploration into this untamed wilderness, a land whose breathtaking vistas and abundant resources mask a deadly reality. The landscape before them is a study in contrasts. Snow-capped peaks pierce azure skies, verdant valleys teem with game, and crystal-clear streams promise rich harvests of beaver pelts. Yet this same paradise harbors constant peril, as hostile tribes fiercely defend their ancestral territories. Each man in the camp has left behind a life of relative safety, traveling incredible distances, some over 1,000 miles, driven by dreams of prosperity in this dangerous Eden. Their shared ambition is simple, yet profound: to amass wealth through the lucrative beaver fur trade and elevate their families from poverty to prosperity. But this common goal belies the complexity of their frontier existence. Beyond the straightforward economics of trapping lies a rich tapestry of human interaction. As these men venture deeper into native territories, they become unwitting participants in a grand cultural exchange. Through trade negotiations, marriages into tribal communities, and the raising of mixed-race families, they create an intricate web of relationships that transcends the simple narrative of trappers seeking fortune. This complex social fabric weaves together different cultures, languages, and traditions, forming a unique frontier society that would help shape the American West. In the harsh reality of frontier life, practicality trumped all other considerations, with economic opportunity serving as the primary catalyst for every decision. These mountain men, distinct from the homesteaders, who would later populate the West, operated as mobile entrepreneurs. Their relationship with the land was transient yet intimate. They knew every creek and valley, but claimed none as permanent home. Their nomadic lifestyle, driven by the seasonal patterns of beaver and the demands of the fur market, created an unexpected bridge between two worlds. This unique position as cultural intermediaries led to fascinating developments in frontier society. Many trappers, finding themselves welcomed into tribal communities, developed bonds that transcended their original commercial interests. These relationships often deepened into genuine cultural integration, with trappers not only learning tribal customs and languages but also marrying into these communities. The children born from these unions represented a new chapter in American frontier history. Individuals who straddled both worlds, combining European and Native American heritage in ways that would fundamentally shape the character of the frontier. Among these frontier figures, none embodied this cultural synthesis more perfectly than George Drouillard, who at age 36 had already become a legend in his own right. His life story reads like a carefully crafted narrative of frontier integration, beginning with his birth in 1773 in what we now know as Old Sandwich Town, Windsor, Ontario. Drouillard's very existence represented the merging of two worlds. Born to a French-Canadian father and a Shawnee mother, he inherited a rich dual heritage that would prove invaluable in his chosen profession. Growing up in the borderlands between European settlement and Native American territory, young Drouillard absorbed the essential skills of frontier survival as naturally as breathing. His expertise ranged from the fundamental tracking game through dense forest, reading weather patterns, and navigating unmarked wilderness, to the more specialized arts of cartography and wilderness survival. Each skill was honed through practical experience, making him an exemplary woodsman by any measure. Yet Drouillard's education went far beyond practical wilderness craft. His father's position as a commissioned captain in the British Army specifically recruited for his expertise in Iroquois interpretation for the British Indian Department, opened additional doors. This unique upbringing enabled young George to master not only French and English, but also several Native American languages, including both Shawnee and Iroquois. Perhaps most significantly, he became adept in the widespread sign language used by various North American tribes, a skill that would prove invaluable in his future endeavors. This comprehensive skill set, combining practical frontier expertise with sophisticated linguistic abilities, made Druillard a unique bridge between cultures. His proficiency in sign language, in particular, demonstrated his deep understanding of indigenous communication systems, which were far more sophisticated and standardized than many European settlers realized. The year 1803 marked a pivotal moment in both Drouillard's life and American history, when Meriwether Lewis, recognizing his exceptional abilities, recruited him for what would become one of the most ambitious expeditions in North American exploration. The voyage of discovery, launching in 1804, would transform not only Drouillard's reputation, but also the nation's understanding of its western territories. As part of the Lewis and Clark expedition, Drouillard played a crucial role in this unprecedented journey across the high plains, through the formidable Rocky Mountains, and ultimately to the Pacific Ocean, a round trip that would cover thousands of miles of previously unmapped territory. This historic expedition cemented Drouillard's reputation as a frontier legend. Upon his return, his expertise and experience set him apart from ordinary trappers and explorers. Among the younger, less experienced trappers in his current group, Drouillard's participation in the Lewis and Clark expedition earned him an almost mythical status. His presence alone seemed to lend credibility and security to their dangerous enterprise, as if his experience with the legendary expedition had somehow rendered him invulnerable to the perils of frontier life. Druillard himself contributed to this aura of invincibility, often declaring that his mixed heritage granted him a special status in the wilderness. He would boast that being half-native made him as comfortable in these untamed territories as any indigenous inhabitant, suggesting that this gave him unique immunity from the dangers that threatened other trappers. His claims of safety stemmed from a belief that his Native American blood somehow granted him an innate right to traverse these lands freely, without fear of the consequences that might befall others. However, even the most inexperienced trappers in the group recognized the element of bravado in these claims. While they respected Drouillard's skills and experience, they understood that his confidence, however well-earned, carried a hint of dangerous overconfidence. These novice frontiersmen, despite their limited experience, possessed enough wisdom to recognize a fundamental truth. They were all, regardless of heritage or expertise, uninvited intruders in territories that belonged to others. The reality of their situation was stark and unavoidable. Their presence in these tribal lands, unauthorized and unwelcome, exposed them to severe consequences. The threat of violent death loomed constantly, particularly from four powerful tribes who dominated the region: the Cheyenne, known for their fierce warrior tradition; the Arikara, skilled defenders of their Missouri River territory; the formidable Comanche, whose military prowess was legendary; and most significantly in this region, the Blackfoot. The Blackfoot tribe held particular significance in this territory, having established and maintained control over the northern plains through generations of martial prowess. Their society was built upon a warrior culture that recognized the vital importance of controlling prime hunting territories. These weren't merely hunting grounds. They were the lifeline of their people, essential for their survival and prosperity. The Blackfoot's approach to defending these crucial resources had been consistently aggressive and effective. They had established a clear pattern of forcefully repelling any unauthorized intrusion into their territory, whether by other tribes or white trappers. Their reputation for fierce resistance to trespassing was well documented, and, up to this point, they had shown no signs of softening their stance or altering their defensive strategy. Despite the looming threats, every man in the camp had made a conscious decision to embrace these dangers when they first ventured into the frontier. On this particular crisp morning, as they huddled around their meager breakfast of dried jerky and pemmican, the traditional concentrated mixture of dried meat, fat, and berries. Their collective resolve remained steadfast. The potential financial rewards of the fur trade continued to outweigh the considerable risks they faced daily. These men were not merely adventurers. They were entrepreneurs who had carefully calculated the ratio of risk to reward. Yet their pursuit of profit did not equate to reckless behavior. The trappers operated with a sophisticated system of checks and balances that would have impressed any modern business operation. Each dawn brought a precise routine that balanced safety with efficiency. The morning would begin with a detailed briefing session where the officer in charge would carefully review the day's proposed trapping territories with each group. This was followed by a rigorous equipment checkout process overseen by the quartermaster, whose detailed records would later face scrutiny from the fur company's accountants back east. Every trap, every tool, and every supply item was logged with meticulous precision, reflecting the substantial investment their financial backers had in this dangerous enterprise. The pre-dawn departure ritual was equally well orchestrated. The trappers would move out in carefully organized groups of 4, a number that experience had proven optimal for both safety and efficiency. This wasn't merely an arbitrary arrangement, but rather a tactical decision refined through years of frontier experience. The 4-man system represented a careful balance between maximizing coverage of trapping territory and maintaining adequate security against potential threats. These groups would systematically work their way along the tributary streams that fed into the main river, following a well-planned strategy. While 2 men focused on the technical aspects of setting and maintaining the beaver traps, their companions maintained constant vigilance, their eyes scanning the surrounding landscape for any sign of hostile movement. This carefully choreographed operation had proven remarkably effective. The vast majority of trappers who followed this system managed to survive their dangerous profession, despite the constant threats they faced from both nature and human adversaries. While the 4-man system proved effective for survival, it presented a significant obstacle to achieving the wealth that had drawn these men to the frontier in the first place. The harsh economic reality of this arrangement became increasingly apparent with each successful trap. Every beaver pelt, regardless of which team member actually secured it, had to be divided equally among the 4 men. This division of profits was further diminished by the substantial cut claimed by the fur trading companies, who provided the essential financial backing and supplies for these expeditions. The mathematics of survival, while sound from a security standpoint, proved frustrating from a financial perspective. This economic arrangement particularly rankled George Drouillard, whose distinguished reputation and vast experience led him to view these precautions as an unnecessary burden. Drawing confidence from his unique combination of formal training and native heritage, he began to see the 4-man system as more than just financially limiting. It was, in his mind, an insult to his abilities. His extensive knowledge of frontier life, combined with what he perceived as an innate understanding of the wilderness inherited through his Shawnee bloodline, convinced him that he could operate more effectively alone. Drouillard's frustration eventually manifested in bold defiance of established protocols. In recent days, he had taken to completing his morning meal quickly, then mounting his horse and silently disappearing into the hills before anyone could object. His only companions on these solitary expeditions were his basic weapons: a single-shot rifle for hunting and defense, a pistol for close encounters, and a tomahawk, traditional tools that he believed sufficient for any challenge he might encounter in the wilderness. His solo ventures struck his fellow trappers as acts of dangerous hubris. Many of these men had personally discovered the gruesome remains of less fortunate colleagues who had attempted similar solitary expeditions. These grim discoveries had left indelible impressions, memories of mutilated bodies serving as stark warnings against the folly of facing the wilderness alone. They watched Drouillard's daily departures with growing concern, unable to reconcile his apparent confidence with their own traumatic experiences. The contrast between Drouillard's self-assured independence and the proven dangers of solitary trapping created a palpable tension in the camp. Many of his fellow trappers had experienced the horror of discovering their fallen comrades, bodies terribly mutilated and brutally killed. Grim testament to the savagery that awaited those who ventured alone. These men, haunted by such gruesome discoveries, could not comprehend how Drouillard had convinced himself he was somehow immune to the fate that had befallen others. They watched his daily departures with a mixture of dread and disbelief, unable to understand how someone of his experience could succumb to what appeared to be a mortally dangerous delusion. The seasoned veterans of the frontier, their faces weathered by years of harsh experience, repeatedly implored Drouillard to abandon his solitary ventures. Their pleas, born of hard-won wisdom and haunting memories of fallen companions, fell on deaf ears as Drouillard's early successes only reinforced his dangerous confidence. Day after day, while others adhered to the safety of group trapping, Drouillard would return triumphantly to camp, his horse laden with an impressive bounty of beaver pelts. His solitary success proved intoxicating, as the mathematics of his venture revealed a stark financial advantage. After paying the fur trading company's share, Drouillard was pocketing 100% of the remaining profits from each pelt, while his fellow trappers divided their earnings 4 ways, leaving them with a mere 25% each. This dramatic difference in earning potential grew more apparent with each successful expedition, feeding his conviction that he had discovered the key to frontier fortune. The allure of such prosperity proved irresistible. Druillard had calculated the equation of risk versus reward and found the traditional safety measures wanting. In his mind, the supposed protection offered by the four-man system was nothing more than a costly burden, an unnecessary sacrifice of profit that he could no longer justify. And so on this fateful morning, as his companions methodically organized themselves into their customary groups, Drouillard maintained his defiant routine. With a cheerful wave and an air of casual confidence that had become his trademark, he mounted his horse and disappeared over the hills, silhouetted against the rising sun. As darkness descended that evening, an unusual tension gripped the camp. The normally boisterous atmosphere around the campfire had been replaced by an oppressive silence, broken only by the crackling of flames and the distant howl of wolves. The men's faces, illuminated by the flickering firelight, reflected growing concern as the hours crept by, with no sign of their accomplished companion. The anxiety deepened as each four-man team returned to camp, each bearing the same troubling news. None had caught even a glimpse of Druillard throughout the day. His usual hunting grounds had been eerily empty, devoid of both man and trap. As the gravity of the situation became clear, a suffocating sense of dread settled over the camp like a heavy shroud. Yet the impenetrable darkness of the wilderness night rendered any immediate search impossible. A cruel reality that forced the men to wait in tortured helplessness. They passed a restless night, their sleep plagued by dark imaginings and the weight of unspoken fears. The following dawn brought little relief as they emerged from their tents to face another crisp morning along the riverside. The absence of Drouillard's familiar figure around the morning fire only confirmed their worst apprehensions. The empty space where he should have been sitting, confidently planning another solo expedition, now seemed to mock their previous warnings and his own unwavering self-assurance. A suffocating atmosphere of foreboding enveloped the camp as the men gathered to discuss their options for locating and potentially rescuing their esteemed companion. Drouillard's reputation as a legendary mountain man had earned him deep respect among his peers, making his absence all the more troubling. Without delay, they assembled a search party of their most experienced trackers to systematically explore the surrounding wilderness. Back at camp, the less experienced trappers waited in tense anticipation, their minds churning with dark possibilities as the hours crawled by. When the search party finally returned, their appearance told the story before they could speak a word. They burst into camp in disarray, their faces ashen with shock, eyes wide with horror, bearing news that would forever haunt those who heard it. The scene they had discovered painted a gruesome picture of Drouillard's final stand. The search party had tracked him to a small creek where tragedy had unfolded. There, they found evidence of an ambush by Blackfoot warriors. While the exact number of attackers remained uncertain, The abundance of arrows scattered across the battleground suggested a significant force had descended upon the lone trapper. The ground told the story of his desperate final moments with brutal clarity. According to the signs they rayed in the disturbed earth and scattered evidence, Drouillard had not gone down without a fierce fight. In his final moments, he had demonstrated the skill and courage that had made him legendary. Mounting his horse, he had executed a desperate defensive strategy, wheeling his mount in tight, frantic circles while returning fire with deadly precision. They found spent cartridges from both his rifle and pistol, indicating he had exhausted his firearms before resorting to hand-to-hand combat. Even after his ammunition was spent, Drouillard had continued his resistance with knife and tomahawk. The blood-stained trail left by the retreating Blackfoot warriors testified to his effectiveness. Several of his attackers had clearly sustained serious wounds in the encounter. However, superior numbers eventually prevailed. The search party found his horse, felled by multiple arrows, and nearby, the spot where Drouillard himself had made his final stand, the ground around him bristling with arrows and lance shafts that had finally brought down the legendary frontiersman. In those final agonizing moments, one can only imagine the bitter realization that must have washed over Druillard as he lay mortally wounded in the very wilderness he had so confidently claimed as his domain. The territory that had seemed so welcoming, so familiar, had revealed its true, merciless nature. His presumed mastery of these lands proved a fatal illusion, as he faced his end in excruciating pain, surrounded by enemies who showed no mercy for his mixed heritage or legendary status. The warriors carried out their grim victory ritual with methodical brutality, a practice deeply embedded in Plains warfare culture. Whether Drouillard still clung to life or had already surrendered his last breath, they proceeded with their gruesome ceremony. His body was systematically dismembered, his entrails torn from his corpse, and scattered across the blood-soaked ground in a grotesque display of dominance. His hands and feet, the very tools that had made him such a skilled frontiersman, were severed from his body. Finally, in the ultimate act of conquest, they took his head, which would never be recovered, carrying it away as a trophy of their triumph over the legendary mountain man. The search party, hardened men who had witnessed countless frontier horrors, found themselves shaken to their core by the savage spectacle before them. The mutilated remains of their celebrated companion served as a chilling reminder of their own mortality. With trembling hands and racing hearts, they hastily dug a shallow grave, desperate to complete their grim task before sharing Drouillard's fate. They buried what remained of the frontier legend, with none of the ceremony his reputation deserved, their fear of lingering too long overshadowing any desire for a proper burial. The death of George Drouillard sent shockwaves through the mountain man community, fundamentally altering their approach to frontier life. His fate served as a sobering reminder that no amount of skill, experience, or heritage could guarantee survival in these contested lands. The most respected among them had fallen, proving that nature and tribal warfare showed no favoritism, no mercy for reputation or ability. His death marked a turning point in frontier history. After this, few mountain men dared to venture alone into the wilderness, regardless of their confidence or capabilities. The tale of Drouillard's demise became a cautionary legend, passed down through generations of frontier folk. Yet it represents just one thread in the vast tapestry of stories involving mountain men and their complex relationships with Native American tribes. These interactions ranged from peaceful trade and cultural exchange to violent confrontations, each contributing to the rich and often tragic history of the American frontier. As we conclude this dark chapter in frontier history, we must consider, how should we judge George Drouillard? Was he a victim of his own hubris, a foolhardy man who invited disaster through his arrogance? Perhaps he was simply another European intruder who fatally underestimated the determination and capability of those whose lands he invaded. Or was he an intrepid explorer who pushed the boundaries of human courage and paid the ultimate price? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and join us next time on Histories and Native Tales, where we continue to uncover the raw, unvarnished truth of the American frontier.